That was Republican Mitch McConnell, the former GOP leader, someone who just put out a scathing statement about RFK Jr.'s views about the issue of vaccines. He goes on to say that, referring to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a record of trafficking in dangerous conspiracy theories and eroding trust in public health institutions does not entitle Mr. Kennedy to lead these important efforts, referring to efforts to try to treat illnesses and disease.
Now, former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Republican, might be the saltiest Republican in Congress at the moment because he has voted no on quite a few of Donald Trump's cabinet nominees. Cenk, thoughts?
Yeah, I think this one's complicated. So he's terrible on vaccines, but he could do something that would be heroic. So let's talk about that in a second.
All right, so let's talk about how many of the senators voted to confirm RFK Jr. as the Health and Human Services Secretary. So the 52-48 vote was largely along party lines, though Republican Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky once again joined the Democrats to oppose the nomination. McConnell has now voted against 3 of Trump's cabinet nominees, more than any other Republican senator. So the other 2 that he voted against include Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary and Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard was also confirmed yesterday for her position. Now, getting back to Kennedy, he will now serve as the nation's top public health official. And while he certainly has some issues, many of which we've talked about on this show, especially in regard to his views on vaccinations, this little excerpt from Politico is pretty interesting. So they write that from drug makers to doctors' organizations, groups thought to have the clout to steer policy and funding in Washington because they enjoyed bipartisan support and huge lobbying budgets have remained silent about Kennedy. And that's not because they aren't worried, writes Politico, but because they didn't think they could stop him or think the cost of speaking out would be too steep. 5 people representing health groups granted anonymity to speak candidly said. By staying mum, they hope to limit fallout if Kennedy follows through on his plans to strip the industry, meaning the healthcare industry, to the studs. So to be sure, pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare industry is actually really worried about him. And they should be, because something that you and I have noticed, Cenk, that I think a lot of people still don't believe us on, and I don't blame them, is that there is this faction of the Republican base that wants things to change, similar to how the left-wing base wants things to change. So I'm gonna give you a very specific example. This was during my interview on Megyn Kelly's show yesterday. I brought up the issue of Medicare and how our Medicare system is unable to negotiate drug prices. And I want you to pay close attention to how she reacted to this. Take a look. But he would go down as the most popular president in American history if he allowed for Medicare to negotiate drug prices, so Americans and our Medicare system wasn't being price gouged by pharmaceutical companies.
Why won't he do that? I mean, I know why he won't lower the retirement age for Social Security, and he doesn't want to make any Medicare cuts or do anything that's going to increase costs for seniors. But why wouldn't he allow Medicare to negotiate costs?
Honestly, I think if this issue was brought to him by anyone in a very serious way, he would attempt to do it. He doesn't really care about
maybe Dr.
what
Oz
is or isn't allowed, right? So yeah, I mean, that would be incredible. I don't think that he's paying attention to that, but I think if you talk to him and ask him to work on that issue, it could really save the American taxpayers
RFK will do
a lot of money. That would be fantastic.
That, Anna? I mean, this isn't something I spent a lot of time on, but like this sounds like something that wouldn't typically be done because most people are beholden to the drug companies who don't want this. And RFK is not beholden to the drug companies. That's one of the great things about him. That's one of the things the left hates about him. But he, technically oversees Medicare now, and well, when he gets confirmed, which is going to be tomorrow. And Dr. Oz directly oversees Medicare and Medicaid. And so like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually will touch the untouchable.
Oh, it would embarrass Democrats so much if they managed to do that. It would be the most embarrassing thing for Democrats who claimed under the Biden administration that they were going to do it, but they're beholden to the pharmaceutical companies as well. So look, some people might not take kindly to the framing, but you got to frame things in a way that speaks to the right. And I just find it hard to believe that right-wing voters want to be like scammed by the pharmaceutical industry and price gouged when it comes to our Medicare system, paying for pharmaceutical drugs for the elderly. Like, I'm sure they don't want that. So let's work together and actually get something done, because the methods that we have relied on so far, which is relying on corrupt politicians in Congress to do it, has not really worked out so well. And to draw attention to the fact that, there are corrupt members on both sides of the political aisle, and that we need to do something about that in order to actually accomplish the right policies as it pertains to Medicare, I think is the right way to go about it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
So I want to get back to your framing in a second, and I want to tell you, this story actually is one of the most telling quotes of all time from a senator. So I'm going to come back to that too. First, starting on what you told Megyn Kelly, I think that's exactly right, Anna. And so I did a tweet that was very similar, and so well received by Megyn Kelly, really well received by MAGA online. You know why? So we might get super frustrated at them on social issues and other issues, etc. But they're also American citizens, and they also pay drug prices, high drug prices. And I don't know anyone who's like, oh yeah, I'd like to pay more so that giant pharmaceutical companies, by the way, charging us like 4 times more than other developed nations, 10 times more, 20 times more, so that they can get richer. No one's actually in favor of that other than the corrupt, right? So when you talk about framing, Anna, that's exactly right. Who's in charge right now? Is it Democrats or Republicans? Whether we like it or not, it's Republicans. So if your framing is, you guys suck, man, I bet, oh, you suck, oh, you'll never do it, you're racist. How does that help? If you say, hey guys, do you hate drug prices being this high and for no reason? They go, yeah, I hate drug prices being high. Do you like the fact that the drug companies can set their own prices? Does that sound like free market to you guys? No, doesn't sound like free market. You know why? Because it isn't free market. It's total and utter corruption. And you're absolutely right. So it's bipartisan. So the idea that like somebody wrote online to a comment on my tweet that, this is just the Republicans that do it. And then somebody else wrote, no, it's just the Democrats that do it. That's not, no, they both definitely take gazillions of dollars from pharmaceutical companies. This rule exists because both sides are infinitely corrupt. George W. Bush started this. Barack Obama made a deal with the drug companies to maintain this so that he could pass Obamacare. They're so powerful, the president has to negotiate and say, okay, I'll let you be corrupt and rob the American taxpayers, honestly, by the end of this, trillions of dollars. Why? Why does Obama need to do that? Because he knows not only were the Republicans corrupt at the time, but his own party in Congress would have never passed the bill because they would have asked for permission from their donors and would not have received that permission. The quote I'm about to give you is a perfect example of that in a second. So, but we have the populist plank on tyt.com, and it's 6 things that almost all Americans agree with. And there it is, negotiate all drug prices. Okay, so that is in the 80s in approval. And if people knew exactly what it meant, I think it'd be at 98% in approval. And I would say to Republicans and the Trump administration and RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz, why not be a hero? Why not do the most popular things first? Why make yourself unpopular by going, oh, I'm gonna go after the polio vaccine or something nuts like that? You'll lose the whole country. Why don't you do things that are intensely popular first? And would it embarrass the Democrats? Look, Biden, to be fair to him, did negotiate drug prices on 10 drugs, eventually, kind of, maybe. Insulin immediately, yes, that was true, okay? 10 out of tens of thousands of drugs. Obama didn't lift a finger, right? Trump in his first term didn't lift a finger. All that populist talk, and he didn't do anything either. So this time around, this is what the test that we have to ask MAGA, Trump, and everyone else. Are you guys real populists, or are you enormously full of crap? The only thing we could do is pose that question. They're the ones who are going to answer that question. Now let me get to the senator's quote, because It's just perfect for describing how Washington works. So this is Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina. He's a Republican. He said about the pharmaceutical industry and their lobbyists, quote, "I believe that silence is consent," meaning that they're not objecting to RFK Jr.'s nomination. Quote, "The fact that they haven't opposed Kennedy publicly suggests to me that folks that I'm instructed by are okay with this nomination."
Oh my God.
I told you, okay? So these senators are the most corrupt people in the whole country. They're not the best of us. They're the absolute worst of us. But thank you for the confession, Senator Tillis. The people I am instructed by, that is who the lobbyists are. So if you ever wonder why those 6 enormously popular things in the populist plank never pass, even though the overwhelming majority of the country is in favor of it, overwhelming majority of Democratic voters and Republican voters are in favor of it, it's because the senators get instructed to not pass popular bills by the people who control them through legalized, unadulterated bribery.
Yes. In fact, not a lot of members of the private health care industry were willing to go on the record for this Politico piece. There was one guy, though. His name is George Benjamin. He's the executive director for American Public Health Association, which is a group that basically looks out for the financial interests of the private healthcare industry. So he says in this Politico piece that the healthcare industry thinks RFK Jr. is the wrong person for the job. With good respect to all my buddies, they're making the false assumption that if they stay silent, they will get something in return. Now, Kennedy has suggested that hospitals, doctors, and drug makers work together to keep Americans sick. Argued that the industry influence needs to be ripped away from federal policymaking, insinuated that health institutions intentionally bury inconvenient evidence, and proposed lopping off entire parts of the health regulatory structure. Now, all of that sounds good with the exception of the very last part, because what does that mean? What kind of regulations are we talking about lopping off? But during his confirmation hearing, he also criticized the influence of healthcare companies over the Department of Health and Human Services. He complained about the high cost of pharmaceutical drugs, and he also called out the overprescription of pharmaceutical drugs by doctors. But look, I want to be as clear as possible and comprehensive as possible as we do this story, because this is not some sort of done deal. And while there's reason to be somewhat optimistic in regard to what RFK Jr. might do in regard to pharmaceutical drugs, there's also some foreshadowing that you should know about. So Big Pharma is hoping that Kennedy is more bark than bite, and there's reason why they're hoping that. So Trump took 3 hours to dine at his Mar-a-Lago club with Kennedy and executives from pharmaceutical giants, and later said Kennedy would work with the industry, not against it. Kennedy has more recently partied with representatives of companies that make the weight loss drugs he once railed against. So look, Big Pharma is highly influential and humans are deeply, deeply flawed. While people like you and I, Cenk, don't really care much for the cocktail parties. In fact, I would rather not be at the cocktail parties. Others really do like and value being invited to those shindigs. So we'll see how it plays out. But for me, it's not so much the various individuals who have been nominated by Trump to serve in his administration. This is about people power. This is about working together with like-minded Americans on specific issues and applying pressure on our politicians to actually serve us what's in the best interest of Americans. And in this case, what would be in the best interest of Americans is allowing the Medicare system to negotiate for lower drug prices so we're not all getting fleeced by Big Pharma.
Yeah, last thing for me is, look, it's a topsy-turvy world. I mean, if you told me a decade ago that Megyn Kelly was going to agree with you that we should force Medicare to negotiate drug prices when the entire Republican Party was against that idea, 100% of the Republican Party was against that idea, I would have told you there's no way. A decade from now, Megyn Kelly turns into a raging progressive? But now
she's not a raging progressive.
Which
Let's
she
be clear.
isn't. Yeah, no. I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying. That's my point. She is not a raging progressive, yet she agrees with us on that. So please note the interesting realignment that's happening. Like, I know that people that are in the old world, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, they can't get that out of their heads. They're all evil. Everything they say is evil, etc. But how about when they say something that we're saying? How could that be evil? I don't mean we as in the Young Turks, I mean we as in the left. So take yes for an answer. Now, last thing is, guys, it doesn't mean they're gonna do it. It's a giant if, right? And so the only people who could answer that question is them. So, but should we give them credit if they actually get this done? My answer to that is, of course. So what are we like? But there is a real line of thinking here that if Trump does something we always wanted, we should yell at him anyway, and we should be upset about that because Trump's going to get the credit. I honestly, hold on, Anna. That says to me that you don't care about the American people. You don't care what bills actually pass and affect their lives. You don't care that their drug prices are too high and some of them can't even take those drugs and they wind up dying. It means you don't care about the voters at all. All you care about is BS political partisan games. And I don't care about that at all. If Trump passes all the things we want, I'll give him infinite credit. Is that likely to happen? No, it's not likely to happen. We'd be super lucky to get 2 or 3. But if he passes those things that we wanted, hell yes, I'm gonna give him credit. And anyone who doesn't is fundamentally dishonest.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.